Hello and welcome to Vlog 3, the coaching process in Paralympic sport. Because parasport is not featured in most S&C degrees, the first section of this presentation will be setting the scene by discussing the existing literature in terms of coaching strategies as well as exercise physiology. Once the content has been provided, key events will be analysed, examining how content was delivered, explaining why there were some difficulties during the process, as well as suggesting what could be done to improve the delivery of future sessions. The key take-home message is that para coaches need to be excellent at planning ahead when training at facilities. This is because most able-bodied training centres are not suited to para athletes. Fundamentally, a lack of equipment could limit coaches' scope for offering choice, variety and progressions in their sessions, which in turn may make training a repetitive affair for the athletes involved. Since 1960, the number of athletes participating in the Paralympics has increased from 400 athletes to approximately 4,000 athletes from 146 countries. Despite this surge of popularity, there is limited research focused on Paralympic sport, despite calls for more research in this area. In particular, this vlog is a response to the work of McMaster et al. 2012 and Cregan et al. 2007. Both papers examined the challenges for coaches with a disability and reported a lack of appropriate training facilities and coaching education, but they expressed an interest in conducting future research to see if these trends carried over to able-bodied coaches working with para-athletes. Okay, so coaching in the para domain has a lot in common with able-bodied coaching. For example, both coaches will aim to improve an athlete's technical skills and quality of life, and coaches who wish to use an athlete-centered approach will use some of the behaviours listed below. These have been linked with improving a sense of autonomy and intrinsic motivation in Canadian national wheelchair rugby athletes, as found by Goodwin et al. 2009. We've already discussed some of the unique aspects of para coaching, but understanding the nature of the disability is key to all of this. This requires a fair amount of trial and error to see how far you can push the athlete, but you have to understand the disability so you can make the right decisions. Hopefully you can see that the planning of a session with regards to access to the facility and use of equipment are key determinants of the quality of the session in terms of delivery. If, for instance, a session was poorly planned and the athlete was not able to complete exercises well or with a sense of autonomy, then it doesn't matter how motivational and supportive my behaviours were, the athlete would still feel a lack of independence and lack of sense of achievement. I think this leads us on nicely to introduce the athlete and his disability. Sam is a wheelchair rugby player who's been invited to a GB development squad camp in the next coming weeks, and we're doing some preparation work together towards that. In spinal cord injuries, an inverse relationship exists where the higher up the injury on the spinal cord results in the greatest detriment to performance. Sam's level of injury is on the 5th cervical vertebrae. This is known as tetraplegia, which means all 4 limbs are affected. An in-depth discussion of the physiological mechanisms is beyond the scope of this video, but if I turn your attention to the left column, you'll see that Sam has limited function in his left hand as well as the lower trunk. As a coach wishing to empower my athlete, I use a range of straps to overcome his lack of grip, but I also stand close by in case he falls over during the movements that require stability, such as the med ball row. For me, the biggest challenge during sessions has been the swapping of one strap with another in as short a time as possible in order to gain a training effect. On occasion, the experimentation of a new strap, like we did today, may make the rest periods between sets up to 5 minutes, with the work time of only 1 minute. That is why it's important to plan accordingly. I'm going to be quiet for a bit and allow you to watch some of the interactions between Sam and myself.
That is on there now, okay? Just have to stay there, huh? Yeah, that's alright. That looks a lot better actually. It looks more symmetrical now, rather than having one arm out and the other one just in. Cool. And do you want the same on the other hand as well? Or you can grab that just fine? Where you can, I think that might be best.
My grip's alright, it's a bit of work.
2 more, mate, come on. One more, mate. Big rope. 10. Breathing stuff. Slowly back in. Cool. And rest. How was that, mate? Did you feel the difference there?
It's definitely, it's definitely better kind of than previous sessions, not having to kind of, because it always felt a bit uneven, kind of sort of resting the ball on the left hand rather than kind of
It was gripping and like pushing in, wasn't
it?
it?
I was
So there was
pushing
always one
in,
arm
had the
straight
whole
up.
hand through that.
A bit of that did creep in though in the last set. Could you feel that?
I did notice that, definitely the elbow kind of.
Is that to do with the strap, do you think? Or do you think just going back to our ways?
Still fine. I think it's just, probably the habit.
You're going to have to remind me how we did
We
this.
had the.
Are we going to put both of these on?
We can manage it. So it's just about how we
Let's
fit everything together.
Why don't we replicate what we did last time?
So last time it was through like this.
That way, yeah.
That
strap was on the side, wasn't it?
Side,
Yeah, cool.
And then we ended up on top of the.
Yes. So it was there, right?
Yeah. So, 2.
Nice, man. Happy? Okay. Up to you, mate, now what's going to work best, whether it's.
That's right.
I'll hold you the bag. Whether it's one at a time, or whether it's both at the same time, or alternating one then the other. Have a play about. Okay, remember one big girdle, up together.
So a big positive is that the various wrist straps and weights have clearly proved useful because Sam is unable to use cable machines and conventional free weights areas such as the bench press. This equipment has obviously allowed me to select from a wider range of exercises as a result. However, we know that strength training is a dynamic process, and as the athlete's capabilities improve, some of the existing equipment may not be sufficient. This could become an expensive approach for any coach aiming to purchase their own equipment, as I have. Meanwhile, the constant trial and error required to tailor sessions to the type of disability is a time-consuming affair. This is exacerbated by the lack of formal opportunities for coach learning. For instance, no one has yet laid out a range of general to special preparatory exercises for this population, nor are there many workshops aimed to share expertise amongst existing coaches. All considered, my vlog appears to confirm the findings of McMaster et al. And Cregan et al. In the context of able-bodied coaches working with para-athletes. There are also some limitations to this presentation, and I think from that are some recommendations for future research. For instance, all the key papers examined in this presentation have used coach samples of less than 5, and they've been mainly observations or from a single period of time rather than longitudinal research. But I think the big one for me is coach bias. This assignment asked me to review myself as a coach, which leaves room for selective bias. I could in reality be a much worse practitioner than I've made myself out to be. And I think leading on from this, there needs to be much more emphasis on the athletes learning, their perceptions and their motivations. This is because research has largely examined what coaches do rather than looking at what the athletes experience, which is crucial when you consider elite coaches are being increasingly evaluated on the athlete's experience of their coaching. And lastly, there needs to be more quantitative assessment in this area. For instance, the coach behaviour assessment system, which I think would prove useful for examining the athlete's perception to my behaviour. For instance, Sam appeared receptive and actively engaged in the guided discovery aspect of the session, but it should be noted that excessive athlete-centeredness can be as restrictive as authoritarian processes, which is why I think it'd be nice to have objective data on this topic.